Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of Be Freaking Awesome. I'm one of your hosts, Sami Kinnison, here with Angela Belford. And today we are going to be asking the question, are we asking too much? It's a little bit ironic. We're going to be asking ourselves the question, are we asking too much? But Angela, you have a lot of thoughts about this right now, particularly some conversations you've been having, different travel you've been doing, things like that. So we're going to kind of get into it and the nitty gritty of that. But first, I think that it would be a huge miss for us not to acknowledge that last week we had a huge milestone hit, and we're going to take a pause to celebrate because that's what we do. We pause and we celebrate. On February 29th, Leap Day, was the 6-month anniversary of Traveling Light being published. Woo! Yeah! Happy dance, happy dance. I like that we sometimes add in little pause for the YouTube watchers to see us dance, that everybody listening is probably like, I don't know what's happening. Everybody's just making sound effects and a little breathy. But anyway, it's a reason to go watch if you want. Angela, how are you feeling?
I used to think it was weird that people watched podcasts. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say I used to think it was weird people watching podcasts on YouTube, and then if I listen to one of our episodes because I want to remember what we said, or I like to anyway. I love the podcast. I mean, I love the YouTube version of it, and I tell people all the time that's because you get the whole 3D effect, Anyway,
right?
How am I feeling? I have a lot of feelings. Number one, it's shocking to me that it's already been 6 months. That's so hard to imagine. It feels like it's just been not very long at all. And in other ways, it feels like that was a different lifetime. I mean, that was all last year. And I have these moments where I will log in and see the sales and get to practice disappointment. And then I will meet with somebody or talk with somebody that will get the book, and they'll be reading it, and they will you can tell it has changed the trajectory of their life. And then I just am like, if that one person, it was worth all the effort. So right now I am currently experiencing a lot of happiness around this because there's a person in my life that they were actually early coaching client about 2 years ago. And then they were on the pre-reader. So they read it last year and as a pre-reader. No, they were on the launch team. And so they read it and they were excited about it. And then in their own personal work that they're doing, they were like, oh, I'm really getting into a lot more understanding somatic processing. And so, Angela, I have been rereading your book, and man, I don't know if it's I'm in the right headspace, if it's reading it the second time, but look at this. And she we were on a Zoom call, and she's holding up all these places where she's highlighted it. And I was like, oh, would you like to? I've changed the coaching method a lot in the last 2 years. And so being able to coach somebody who has been through the whole process and see her have these giant shifts, monumental, which I was shocked by because we had such nice shifts when she went through the coaching the first time. And so that was cool. I mean, I love evolution. I love transformation, the whole idea. And so it's very rewarding right now. And then also this last weekend, I was at a conference getting to talk about it and get to expand further people that are listening and just seeing how it resonates with people. I love it. It's awesome. It's very cool. I'm really settling in, I think, to the idea that we put a lot into the book launch, but then, I mean, people might not find it for 5 or 6 years. I mean, people have found Be Freaking Awesome 5 years later and been like, oh man, this really helped me a lot. And so I love I'm really settling into the long-term impact that books can have. And I know we all think they're going away because of e-readers and attention span, and maybe so, but man, I love when people pick it up and just that 1% improvement. It's really rewarding.
Well, and I think it's interesting though, because not everybody, particularly with the person you were talking about who read it at the beginning and then sort of rereading it now, we're not always, we're on the journey and we're not all at the exact same square on the journey. I don't know why in my brain, being on the journey is a life board, like the game of life where there's the different squares. And so in my head, it's
Yes.
always like, not everybody's on the same square as me, but that doesn't mean that we're not all on this path. And when you read it on,
Superficial.
this square, you're going to get these things out of it. But when you have made it down around the path and you've gone up a mountain and down a valley and around a little loop-de-loop, and then you read it again, you're going to get something different from it. And even somebody who right now, if they read the book, they might be like, they might not be ready for it. They might blow it off. So even if somebody didn't find it today, finding it 5 years from now might be the exact perfect time that they needed that information in their life, not just about buying it today or reading it today.
I love that you talk about it from the life board, because I was also in January able to speak to a group of college students, and you could just see like they were going to make some different path choices in their life. One of them literally said, "Oh, she's a junior in college. I didn't know there was still time for me to heal from my childhood stuff." Of course there is, baby. Like, yeah, that's the work you've got to do for the rest of your life. So that's just, I have to remember whenever I log into the sales dashboard, or my bank account, and see that I have to measure in life impact. Not necessarily, it doesn't always show up in dollars today. I think that I believe the world works the way it's supposed to work, and I get dollars in the way that I need to get dollars, right? Like my needs are met. Actually, that's kind of a good segue into what we're going to talk about today. But the impact is really the reason why I go through the grueling process. I mean, if you go back and listen to my episode on the messy middle, the editing process with Gwen, like, I'm pretty open about how grueling the process is. I've had several episodes where I say I don't help people with books because it's just so hard. And then now I'm right now helping two authors bring their books to life. And so I'm like, well, maybe I do. If I can practice denying it for a little bit longer, then I don't know. We'll see.
That's super funny because I think that you brought up in like the first 5 episodes how you don't help people publish books. I think that it was that early that you and Josh were talking about it. And
Episode number 4 was our first guest, and that's when I said, I will not do this. Yeah. And then I think
ironically,
I've had 4 since then.
That particular guest is one of the authors that you're helping again.
Yeah, he's on his second book. Yep. So it's a little more of a workbook. So it was a little easier, but still.
No, don't discredit it. So you sort of mentioned a little bit of a segue in that you get your impact and your dollars from other ways. This idea of, are we asking too much? Really and truthfully, I feel like I teased the question. I made it a little clickbaity, I'll admit, because the full question is, are we asking too much from fill in the blank? So are we asking too much from our work? Are we asking too much from our significant other? Are we asking too much from our kids? Are the expectations that we have of what we're supposed to get out of things right? Angela, will you flesh this out a little bit more and sort of what you see as like the problem that's happening?
Yeah. Let me set up the context these conversations that I've been having. One is that I happen to have a number of people in my life that are in, I would say, 2 different scenarios. One is that they are looking for a job. Either they don't have a job, or they know they need to get out of the job they have. So they're looking for a new job. And the other one is people who are miserable in their job. So both of them are in what I would consider like just a season of change. And when I end up talking to people, and it's so funny because if you're friends with me and you're looking for a job, like, I think resumes are like a marketing experience. So like, how do you market yourself? And so I nerd out with people on that whole experience. So I like to ask a lot of questions. And what I'm coming to see is that when we are looking for a job, there's so much that we need for this job to give us. And I think it's hard. It might be unrealistic but it also then it kind of makes the process complicated. And so I started thinking about this. A friend of mine, y'all know I go to New Orleans a lot. My friend Lily in New Orleans, she got a job in a boutique, which is fine. I wasn't judging her. I was very curious. Like, you are a very highly intelligent person. Is this hard for you? Like, it seems like it would not be using your brain, and it would seems like it would not be, all the things. And she goes, Angela, I like to eat. I like to have a good time. And in America, we trade some time for some money. And I use that money to eat and to have a good time, pay my mortgage, that sort of thing. And she goes, my job doesn't have to like meet all my needs and all my fulfillment needs. And I remember when she said it, I was like, what? And I've really been like processing this. I know it seems really silly.
How long ago was this, though?
Everything. A couple of years.
Couple of years that you've been processing through this. So you're like, I don't know what to do with this. I'm not ready to throw it out, but I'm just going to set it here and keep like flipping it around, being like, what a novel idea.
And I've also I've been sharing it with people, and it's been very helpful. It's a very helpful and insightful perspective to have. Because then where she found her fulfillment is she goes, oh man, I love it because I'm on Jackson Square. Like, I meet all kinds of visitors. I direct them to places. So I'm getting to be the kinds of person that I want to be. I still show up in the world the way I want to show up. It's not boring to me. It's really interesting. So number one, that was the first thing that helped me to kind of get on this path. But then when I start talking to people about what they need to, like, from a starting salary and from I'm going to take this job because I need health insurance, then I really started thinking about this in, maybe because I'm friends with a bunch of math nerds, maybe because I'm secretly a math nerd, but I've been thinking about, I also nerd out on Maslow's hierarchy and like getting our basic needs met. I think getting your basic needs met, like food, shelter, clothing, is a math problem, right? Like, how many dollars do you need to get those needs met? Now, all of this is coming from a very privileged perspective. This is not considering systemic racism and poverty and all of those things. This is much different than that, because I absolutely know there are people in America that have to work 2 full-time jobs to be able to make ends meet. That's not what this is about. But for the vast majority of people, and certainly people that are talking to a life coach, there's a math problem. Like, this is how much I need for food, shelter, clothing, health insurance, car insurance, those sorts of things. But then there is the secondary piece, what I consider lifestyle. And lifestyle is things like, do I need to work nights? Do I need to work more than 40 hours a week? Do I get any vacation time? Do I have energy left at the end of the day to be able to actually live my life? Do I have money to be able to go on a vacation? Do I have those things that are the intangibles? And am I fulfilled? And that is a calculus problem. Like, it has so many variables and so many parameters and so many things that factor in. Like we've talked about on this podcast, you and I's life season is different. Mm-hmm. And so what you have to do to be able to have a lifestyle, to have energy at the end of the night, after you put 2 toddlers to bed, after you worked all day, is a very different place than where I'm at in the empty nest, right? And so from my perspective, when we can separate those out, the conversation gets simpler, and you solve the right problems at the right sequence, order of operations. Again, more math.
Well, and I think that what's interesting, though, is that there are a lot of people who get fulfillment from work. And when you are struggling because you are not getting fulfillment from work, and I think this is the key, when it feels like that's wrong, when it feels like something is wrong because
Mm.
I am not being fulfilled at work. Is it? That's the question. Is it actually wrong for you not to be fulfilled at work? I I think that you're right in that it's calculus and that there's a lot of variables. Fulfillment at work is just one of those variables. Now, if you
Okay.
are not fulfilled at work, you aren't being treated well, you don't get to hold your boundaries, you have just a lot of the stuff that's bringing you down, that sounds like the the answer to that equation is you should find a different job. If you are like Lily and the work is not fulfilling, but you get to interact with good people, you like the work that you do, or that you don't mind doing the work that you're doing, you've got good boundaries and space to do other things, it doesn't matter that the fulfillment variable isn't as rated as high, so to speak. And so when we think about, are we asking too much from work? I have friends who are all just, I don't know, it's a very unique season right now for my friends in like late 20s, early 30s, because there's this, we went to college, we got jobs out of college, which was not necessarily like, oh, this is going to be my pick of my lifelong job. It was kind of get a job that you can get so you can get experience. And then now it's this time period of like, okay, it's probably been about 5, maybe 8 years. Is this what I'm supposed to do for the rest of my life? Is this it? It's this really interesting existentially crisis moment where you're like, what is the purpose of all of this? What is the point? And I think some people are able to find a lot of purpose in work. And if you aren't in that bucket, that is okay. Nothing is wrong with you. Let's go seek elsewhere, because now you don't have to just keep chasing, well, my it has to be my work, it has to be my work, it has to be my work. You probably do need some purpose somewhere. I'm not
Right.
saying, at least where I'm at in the existential crisis loop, I think that we do need a purpose and we need something that we're kind of feeling fulfilled and emotionally pushed towards. It doesn't have to come from your work.
Indeed. Yeah, I love, and if you haven't read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, it's hard. It's heavy. It was written in the 50s. Of course it was, because I love it. Anyway, but he studied people that had been in the concentration camps in World War II and who survived. And there was a very high rate of suicide in Germany after World War II, as you can imagine, people coming home and finding that their family was all gone. And he looked, and he is revered, or has been credited with turning that around, and it was in his The Search for Meaning. So I absolutely think that we do need meaning, we need fulfillment. I think that sometimes when we hit burnout in a job that we love, it's because we've lost track of what that meaning is, and connecting it to the higher purpose. I can and so the thing is you absolutely have to find meaning, and your meaning could be, I go to this job, I'm treated well, I get paid a reasonable salary for the amount of effort I put in, and I come home, and then I use the money from that job to pay for my fulfilling life, for my children, for my house, for my dog, whatever that is. That could be the meaning for you. It could be that your job is very fulfilling, and that's beautiful and amazing. And if I'm just repeating what you're saying, I'm not
No,
meaning
you're
to.
doing good.
So then let's talk about the other people who are in the situation where their job is making them miserable. And I think that there's actually an equation for that as well. And I was visiting with a friend, and she was lamenting the things, and she texted me after a call, and she was like, I'm so sorry, I feel like I was a Debbie Downer. And I'm like, no, Debbie Downer is like a victim who thinks there's nothing, I have no control, there's nothing I can do about this. What you were describing is, how much am I willing to tolerate, for how long, for what exchange of resources? And so then suddenly you could lump those resources and say, oh, you know what? In 6 months to a year, I will have my house paid off, or I will have my car paid off. And so I'm gonna suck it up, Buttercup, for 6 more months because it ties into this higher purpose that I have of getting debt free, which will then change the arithmetic of finding the next job. And so it was a big light bulb for her because she was like, oh, the exchange of resources is not just time, it's actually energy, it's also mental capacity, right? And time, especially as you get later in your career, is limited. And so, like, yours feels like it's going to go on forever. There's people at the opposite end of the spectrum that have a similar kind of situation where they're like, well, now what? I'm facing down retirement. I think I'm financially ready for it, but now what? What am I going to do? Where's my fulfillment?
I once heard that balance put as the BS to benefit scale. Um, there's a lot of things that could be
Yes.
called BS. There's a lot of things that could be called benefit. There are going to be days where the BS is going to outweigh the benefit by far. And there are going to be days where the benefit outweighs the BS, but it's the average of days. That's the other thing, though, that's also tricky for me in this is that a bad day does not mean a bad job. Bad week doesn't mean a bad
Right.
job. When you start getting into bad months, like, okay, let's look and consider. Let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture. But um, I have a friend who is actually going through this exactly right now, where she has had a job that has been awful for like 4 years. And she is compensated well. She is like been moving up and they've been giving her more responsibility and different things like that. She sort of finally hit her breaking point within the past like 6 months or so. And she actually got offered another job with a different company. And one of the things that she was really struggling with is, but if I change, how do I even know it will be better? How do I know that anything will change and will improve and will, if I'm not just going to be in the same boat in this new job? Part of the advice I gave her was one, you'll never know until you try. Two, you've kind of hit your limit here. And there are times where shaking the etch and sketch can make it different. And so when she can approach the situation with new boundaries at the very beginning, it's different than being in a situation for 4 years and setting up boundaries and expecting and not expecting any pushback on those. Like if there's going to be a learning curve, if I decided to tell my toddler all of a sudden, no, we can't eat a piece of candy every single day, then he's going to have some pushback on that. Whereas if I never let him eat a piece of candy every single day from the beginning, he's probably not going to be too upset about that. So having a new job can sometimes be enough that once you've got this new learning, you can try new things. And I also tried to reassure her, what's the worst that happens? You spend a year or two in a new job and then you can move on. What I think was really beautiful that I did not expect within all of this is that she is actually changing jobs to a job where she will have to work less and she gets paid more. And she is very purposefully using this time and her extra time that she has to start a nonprofit with her extra time. And she has a partner that she's interested in. She was like, I can't make money at this nonprofit for a while, but I now will actually have time that I can invest in something that is fulfilling and purposeful because I will have this job that pays my bills and allows me the time and flexibility where her current job does not. And I'm like, this is literally the epitome of what we're talking about right here is that she has accepted a new job. She starts in the middle of March and she will have the time now because this job does not take too well in theory the goal is that it won't take as much time and energy from her and will allow her space to
Right.
pursue passion and pursue
That's
fulfillment
beautiful.
outside of work. So you don't have to find
Yeah.
fulfillment from work. And I was like, my friend is actually doing this. Super exciting.
So cool.
Sorry.
Well, and I mean, related to that is that I would say I have a pretty great lifestyle. I love my lifestyle. I started back in 2010. I had a side hustle that at that time paid tiny little bits of money. And I kept doing that side hustle, little bit, little bit, little bit. And it's different than a nonprofit the side hustle had no fulfillment whatsoever. It was just a way to make money, and it helped my clients. It was win-win-win. And now that side hustle, 14 years later, is now does pay for my lifestyle. So that's the other thing I want to tell people is that, like, in this day and time, it's pretty common that people have, I mean, at least people that have want more flexibility in their life, it's not uncommon for people to have a full-time job and a side hustle that they may not ever use it. I hope to never make that my full-time job, but I do hope to build it so that it continues to pay for a very cool lifestyle that I enjoy having. So, and it took a while. It takes time.
I want to hard pivot for a second to address the other side of the question that I also see people struggling with is, am I asking too much from my relationships? And I think that one, we probably should put in the show notes the references back to your relationship with yourself and your relationship with others, because that matters a lot. But I think that there are times where when there's something maybe not quite right with us, we seek to fill that with other people. You can see that in teenagers looking to be affirmed by their boyfriends. You can see that in 50 or, older men dating younger women, seeking that affirmation of feeling young again. I'm trying to give some extreme examples because I know that there are a lot less extreme examples that all of us face of seeking that other person to fill some hole within us. And at the end of the day, people are going to let us down. Our kids are not going to be perfect for us, and our kids are not going to, overcome have all the our kids are not going to be able to fulfill everything that we were never able to. And so that's how I found the purpose, is by setting my kids up for this success, and then they fail. Whatever it is, people are also going to let us down. And so in the middle of this, it feels like it's a little bit of a whole different topic and different ways to address this than is work enough for me. But I also, it would be remiss. Are we asking too much? With the theme of the podcast, with the theme of traveling light, we also have to find ourselves to be enough and not just seek that from other people, really from other things and jobs and stuff as well.
Yeah, I see this a lot. And I know there's a lot of different marriage scenarios in the world today. So I will just say marriage, and please hear marriage, life partner, significant other, however that, anyway, maybe I should just say life partner. I don't know. Anyway, that relationship, I see that a lot, especially I got married very young. I was 21 when I got married, and definitely thought, you complete me, you're supposed to be all things to me. And what I learned is a couple of things. Number one, I had to be a whole person myself. I can't be half of a person. And number two, there's no way one person can be everything for you. They cannot be your sounding board, your confidant, your safe place. They can be a lot of those things. And there are certain things that in a committed monogamous relationship, that there are roles that only that person can play for me, right? But they cannot be everything that I need. I also need other friendships. I also need other fulfillment. I need other relationships. And I think that especially in seasons, I would say, of transition, whether that is like when you first get married, or like transitioning to empty nest, maybe even transitioning to having children. In those seasons of transition, it can be very tempting to just be so focused on that significant other. What's hard is that we don't realize this is going to be true. And what I see in young people is that they get in a new relationship and they just are all into that relationship, and they forget their friends. And they don't realize you're going to need those friends. You need to maintain those friendships. Right. And so, I mean, we probably all have that friend that, like, they ditch us for a couple of years when they get a new relationship, and maybe hopefully it's a couple months. But anyway, yeah.
What's interesting is that, like, when I started dating Chris, he didn't, for better or worse, he didn't let me do that. He's like, no, let's go have dinner with your family. And I'm like, we don't need to see those people. And he's like, I need family. So let's go see your family since my family's too far away. And like, you need to go have a girls' night. And be like, okay, well, you have a guys' night. Nah, I don't need that. I get enough guy time. Go have a girls' night. Get out of the house. I want alone time. Like, I don't know. There's sometimes where I'm like, Chris, you have like a lot of work to do. And other times I'm like, dang, kid, you got a lot of this stuff like naturally. So I don't know how that happened. The other thing, though, the sort of funny story, a much lighter version of this story. The other day I was singing at our house, and I kind of looked at him, and he was like, you sound like an angel, beautiful. And I was like, blah, blah, blah. I don't want like my lover's response to me right now. I need like a girlfriend's response. Like, what do you think? And he was like, no. He literally did this like ethereal voice, like, it was heavenly. It was the most beautiful sound I've ever heard. And I was like, well, see, now you're just BSing me, and I don't believe anything you say. And he was like, no, you're perfect in every way. And I was like, I need a girlfriend's response. And he goes, fine. And he goes, fine, you want a girlfriend's response? Ooh, girl, that was a little pitchy. And he just immediately was like, fine, I'll put on a girlfriend hat. And that was pitchy. Like, not very good. I say pitchy with a P. And so in that same vein, though, there are even the times where I'll be like, you know, does this dress make me look fat kind of thing? And I'm like, no, I need you to put a girlfriend hat on right now to say, yes, that dress does not flatter you as much as other dresses. You don't have to say, I think you look fat. That's not what you're saying. You can say this dress is not as flattering. It's harder for our significant other to be that person for us, to be the person to give us objective feedback, to give us sometimes the advice that we need to hear, but that may not be the advice that somebody like your significant other or even your mom or, you know, your super best friend. It's not always the person who we can receive that from. And so having a diversity of relationships, people who you can lean on in different ways is a good thing. And if we're asking just too much, particularly from one person, we're setting up the relationship to just have too much strain, too much stress. You know, there's too much load on the one spot. You need to have a lot of different types of things for the load of all of our life. In my head, that metaphor worked, but I don't know that it actually explained well. Watch the YouTube. You can see my hands. See what I mean?
It's funny because I'm thinking about some of the conversations I've had with my friend Kyle, and sometimes I will be like, I want to talk about this thing, and he will look at me like, that is not our category. And I'll be like, oh, sorry. He's like, no, I'm here. And anyway, it's been very cute where I'm like, okay, sorry. We policy nerd out. We do, we have a list of things that we do together. And okay, I'll find a different girlfriend. Sorry. He'll get real uncomfortable. Anyway, so that's fun.
Yeah.
What else, Sammy? So is there any other place that we ask too much? Like ourselves?
Asking too much of ourselves? Are we asking too much from us? I think yes. I think we are. I think in general, I don't know, just like, yeah, of course, it makes sense. As somebody who is in like a time period where I'm trying to embrace this like super mom mentality, I definitely can see that where I want to show up at work and I want to kick butt and I want to go home and I want to be the rock star mom and I want to be on top of my game with my friendships and I'm going to work out, I'm going to eat right, and I'm going to do all of these things. And there are days where I can and I can do all of those things. And there are days where I don't. And accepting that and being in a space where I'm okay to show up however I show up today has been a long journey, a very, very long journey. Please don't hear me say this and be like, oh, well, something's wrong with me because I'm not there. Years in the making to be at a point where I can accept that there are days that I do not show up as super mom, and there are days that I do. And I think that's okay.
Well, and we talked about a couple of episodes on the relationship with ourselves, where I was even judging myself because I read fiction instead of nonfiction, and so farther on the journey and still on the journey of that. Maybe it's the life's work. Maybe I'll get to be my 90th birthday and go, the thing I had to learn for these 90 years was how to cut myself some slack, and I'm still working on it. I mean, I have no idea.
Right.
I have no idea.
I saw a Instagram reel this morning that was the reminder that every version of you is a good version. And when we spend all of our time beating ourselves up for our bad versions, there will be a point in the future where we'll look back on the version that we're beating ourselves up on right now. And we're going to say, golly, why didn't I appreciate that and recognize and hold special and cherish that version? Every version of you is a good version. And ironically, being able to get to the point where you can accept that, like that's a step. That's a new version of you who can accept the version of you that you are. And I think that if you are hearing all of this and you're like, golly, that sounds so far-fetched, some gentle steps, maybe it's time for you to take a step forward on the life board and read a book, maybe called Traveling Light, about how to unpack these emotions and how to go through all of that. Also, another little baby step is awareness of, am I asking too much? That question is something that you can start to ask yourself. Particularly, I don't think this is a question you have to ask if you're like, wow, things are going well and great and I'm feeling really satisfied in a lot of areas. It's the question of when something doesn't feel right, when we're feeling unsatisfied or feeling off, feeling like, I need to figure this out. It's not flowing well. That is a question that you can ask. That is one of the things. There's a lot of different things that could be happening. It could be that you've got some emotional work to be doing. It could be that you're asking too much from the thing in front of you. It could be something else. Could be that you're getting sick, or I don't know, whatever it is. Like it can be another filtering question as you are approaching and evaluating on our quest to live freaking awesome lives.
Love it.
And do you have any baby steps that you would add or anything you would encourage people to do?
I think my baby step would be, what would be enough? Right? Because then you can kind of like, I'm a big believer in, future self work and past self work and trying to like really put that brain on. But like, if you're getting this feeling that, oh, I'm just not doing enough. Okay, well then what would be enough? And like setting that parameter, setting that standard of excellence for yourself and saying like, okay, I do want to eat right. So I want to eat right 80% of the time. I do want to work out. So I want to work out 3 times a week. I can't work out 3 times a week. So I'm going to park my car out at the farthest point at the grocery store. I'm going to take the stairs at work and I'm going to count those as my workout, right? So decide in advance if you're feeling like, golly, it's not enough. Okay, what would be? Create a checklist. And then that way you can stop and celebrate. Oh, okay. I can assess what exactly I need to get done and really decide in advance. Because I promise you, there's always more work. There's always more laundry. There's always more dishes. If you get done with laundry today, tomorrow there will be more. And if you work at a job, it will never end. And that's good because then you have job security that it's not going to end. So decide what's enough in advance.
I think for me, even when I hit a point when I was working corporate and my job was not cutting it anymore, I was not making it, I still struggled with the question. So what do you want to do instead? And I couldn't answer, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? So I answered the question, how do I want to go about work? What are the other qualities about work that I want? Do I want to be able to get off work at 5 every day? Do I want to have good vacation time? I want to clarify, even on the get off work at 5 every day, like I have friends who don't have kids and it doesn't matter to them to get off work every day at 5. They're like, by all means, I don't want to overwork myself, but I would rather stay till 6 or 6:30 one night and leave earlier on Friday because I got to finish my project completely and it doesn't matter that I stayed late. Mm-hmm. So when I say that, I can be like, well, of course people want that. No, maybe you don't want that. That doesn't have to be your priority. What is your priority? And there can only be not one number one priority. I want to clarify. And so you can't have 100 things on your list and be like, all of these are the number one. There is going to be something matters more than something else. And that's okay to say that these are the things that really matter to me, be able to filter through that list. Does it matter to you that you have to have your fulfillment from work? If that is something that you really hold tight to, okay, you might not be able to get the compensation that you want. Maybe you want to work in a nonprofit and get more of that fulfillment, but you're maybe not going to get the same type of compensation, and you might have to have something else to aid that math equation to meet all of your bills and needs. Whatever it is, you can also make a list, a checklist for your work situation, for how you're willing to be treated in relationships, for how you want anything to operate, and just pre-decide before you get into the moment.
The other thing is that I think when we ask the question of what do I want, I think a lot of times when we're in a place where we don't have what we want and we're not feeling fulfilled and we're not feeling at our best, it's hard to make the list of what I want. And it's okay to start the list of these are the things I don't want. Mm-hmm. I don't want an hour commute. I don't want to have to be on call. I don't want, and it's okay to start with that because I think our brains, for safety reasons, our brains are wired for the negative and wired to look for danger. And so if you go ahead and make the list of all the things you don't want, then it actually will then free your brain up. Oh, okay. You're covered the dangerous things. Now I'm willing to look at the things that I do want. And sometimes even making the list of things you don't want gives you the positive of that.
Well, so and I think okay my brain sometimes does things where it's like, if I said I want a 30-minute commute, if I found a job that was a 35-minute commute, it's like, well, that's not a 30-minute commute, so didn't meet the mark. Something like I don't want an hour commute leaves flexibility that I could have a 5-minute commute or I could have a 50-minute commute. Even on the flip side, if I said I want a 30-minute commute and I found a job with a 5-minute commute, is that fine? Because it also technically didn't meet the list of, and so there is an element that yes, the what do you not want can filter down to reveal what's left. And that is a really, really good point of another way to start that. Well, I hope you guys have enjoyed this conversation, and really and truthfully, the hope is that it gets you guys thinking about areas of your life and things that you might want to think more intentionally about in order to elevate, be more fulfilled, live a freaking awesome life. I don't know, something like that, I guess, is what we're trying to go for. She says facetiously, of course, that's the exact point of this all. So I'd love to hear, what are you guys thinking? What thoughts has this sparked for you? You guys can email us or message us on social media. Email is podcast@befreakingawesome.com. That's B, just the letter B, no E, just B, freakingawesome.com. We would really love to hear from you, and we are so grateful for all of you guys who listen, who share, who have been a part of our podcast journey for all of these 100+ episodes, or even if this is your first episode to listen. Thank you guys so much for being here. I hope that you have a freaking awesome rest of your day.